meeting is now being recorded.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Johanna Chabot. I'm the Communications Specialist at Dance USA. And welcome to Community Engagement Lessons from the Contemporary Arts Center on Building Audiences for Dance. In today's webinar, we'll hear from the Center for Contemporary Arts, which with the support of the Wallace Foundation is working to attract the growing local community of young African Americans in New Orleans by launching educational and social programs that promote lively interactions between performing artists and the community. Now, Dance USA is a communications partner with the Wallace Foundation on Wallace's Building Audiences for Sustainability initiative. We're sharing news about the initiative and the learnings on building audiences for the arts with the greater arts field. And now the Wallace Foundation has many resources such as case studies, practical guides, and reports on audience building available for download on their website. And you'll see the link here. If you go to this link, it'll take you directly to all the resources, and you just look for the Knowledge Center. Today's speakers, we're very fortunate to have with us two wonderful speakers. We have Neil Barclay. He's the director and CEO of the Contemporary Arts Center in New Orleans, a former attorney and a consultant and practitioner with 3 decades of professional experience. He has served as a hub site representative for the National Dance Project, an advisor on cultural development to one of the largest municipalities in the U.S., and the founding director of a major multidisciplinary art center. We're also joined by Stephanie McKee-Anderson. She is the executive and artistic director of Junebug Productions in New Orleans, a performer, choreographer, educator, facilitator, and cultural organizer. Stephanie has been involved with Junebug Productions as an artist and educator for the past 20 years. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Now, thank you. Now we'll hear both from Neil and Stephanie about their respective organizations and the partnership. Over to you, Neil.
Great. Thanks, Johanna. Just a little bit about the Contemporary Arts Center, just to put our remarks in context. We're a multidisciplinary arts center, and we're dedicated to the production, presentation, and promotion of the art of our time. What that basically means is that we present living artists. We're not a collecting institution, although we do have a very robust visual arts exhibition program, as well as a very active performance program, which really focuses on new work. We were formed in 1976, so we just a few years ago celebrated our 40th anniversary. Do 8 to 12 performances a year, 3 to 6 exhibitions. And we focus a lot on the local community here doing visual and performing arts. But we also do national and internationally recognized artists in our season. We do residencies, workshops, master classes. We have walkthroughs of the exhibitions and previews of performances, school visits, and more. So we're one of the art centers across the country that really focuses on all artistic disciplines. And really our work increasingly is about the intersection of the performing and visual arts. So we're very interested in how artists are working across genres to do their work. So I think that's what I can tell you about the CAC.
Hi, everybody. So Junebug Productions was started almost 40 years ago now by John O'Neill, who was the founding artistic director. Junebug Productions is considered the organizational successor to an older organization called the Free Southern Theater. The Free Southern Theater was started in 1963 as one of many artistic and cultural arms of the civil rights movement. During that time that John O'Neill, Doris Derby, and Gilbert Moses all kind of co-founded Free Southern Theater. Fast forward to almost 40 years later, John decided to close the doors to Free Southern Theater and opened up Junebug Productions, which has kind of continued to shepherd the work that was started by Free Southern Theater and also the original vision for Junebug Productions. Junebug Productions was once a touring theater company, and we moved away from that, and we're now a producing and presenting organization. And our mission is to really create and support artistic works that question and confront the inequitable conditions that have historically impacted the African American community. We see our work as being and working right at the intersection of art and social justice.
Right. Oop, we went all the way to the end somehow. We can go back to the beginning slides. Okay, Stephanie, you want to talk about how this partnership came about? It really predates me. I could certainly talk about the more recent iterations of it, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how long these two institutions have been working together.
So this was a really interesting collaboration, and I love talking about it because it really shows the power of a continued collaboration and continued investigation of work as opposed to things being a one-off. In fact, the partnership, there's a long partnership that is over 25 years old, and that partnership is between the three organizations, believe it or not just between Junebug Productions and Urban Bush Women, but over 25 years ago, our relationship really started in New Orleans, and it started with a 1-month-long artistic residency. And the founding artistic director, John O'Neill, his main question was, as artists, what is our focus and contribution towards change? And he really thought that this long-term investigation of work would be something that New Orleans really needed. And so they went forward with that residency, and that residency really was the beginning of this long history of collaboration that shifted the way that we understand the intersection of art and social justice. And in fact, really, Urban Bush Women talks about it all the time, that was the beginning of them beginning to really frame and be very specific with the language that they have that exists right now around what engagement is and how they see engagement. That investigation is ongoing and has continued in a number of ways. In 2009, their Summer Leadership Institute was brought to New Orleans, and it stayed in New Orleans for over 7 years. Junebug Productions was a partner with Urban Bush Women as they sought to kind of deepen their work of seeing artists and dancers as leaders and as organizers. And that's sort of where the partnership has continued to bloom from there.
Great. And in our end, as the Contemporary Arts Center and dealing with living artists and particularly trying to bring attention to the artists that are living and working in New Orleans, this has been a really vital partnership for us, as Stephanie said, for quite a long time. But in particular, as it relates to Urban Bush Women and the project we did with Wallace, it made a lot of sense for us to return to this partner as we try to deepen our relationship within the African American community. When I first came on board 5 years ago, the Contemporary Arts Center had a very small, notwithstanding this relationship with Junebug, we had a very small audience that was drawn from the African American community in New Orleans. And my mandate and goal was to create a center and a program that really reflected the community in which we lived and worked. And that meant that we needed to really be strategic and intentional about developing an audience from particularly the African American community. And given the kind of work we do, which really does appeal to a younger demographic and people who are looking at innovation and the future of aesthetics and form, we really did want to focus on the younger population that's living and working in New Orleans. So this made a lot of sense. The specific project that we decided to build this particular collaboration on was something called Hair and Other Stories. And the number of interesting things, again, about this collaboration that was interesting in terms of picking this particular work. This was a revisitation of an older work. But as it turned out, the woman they chose to help them to shape and direct the work is also the former curator of performance for the Contemporary Art Center, Rael Myrick Hodges. And so that was an interesting kind of intersection there of this piece again and our own histories. So there were a number of engagement activities. Stephanie, I'll let you talk about this first one that we did. And again, part of the model for Wallace is to try to think of ways in addition to the performance presentation, that you can animate interest and connect audiences specifically to not just the institution, but to the work that we're doing. Steph?
So, yes. So one of the engagement activities that we had was called a hair party. And the hair party, the design of the hair party was really led by urban bush women, and it is something that is very highly interactive, almost like trivia, like a trivia night, also with performance. But the hair party in and of itself is one aspect that was great, but married with our intention, the intentionality of making sure that we're connected to the spaces where the very demographic that Neil mentioned before, just young Black professionals. We had it at a place that is a Black-owned wine shop that has a lovely space in the back of that we've really cultivated a deep relationship, and we continue to lean in on that relationship. They opened their space up to us to allow us to have the hair party there. And one of the other things that we do when we have these hair parties is we take every opportunity that we can to let people know about what they might be getting. And it almost serves as a bit of a teaser and sets up some excitement about the performance itself. We also had a pop-up pop-up box office that was there. So it allowed people to buy tickets in advance, which does make a difference, giving people different opportunities, catching them while the excitement is still there, to be able to get those tickets sold in advance of the party itself. And also it breaks down this idea that work doesn't get done in fun, new, exciting ways that we're able to actually have conversations in a different way than we're able to have the kind of conversations that happen in a typical Q&A.
Thanks. So one of the tactics that we developed as part of the Wallace program, we did, like many of us do, pre-show talks, post-show talks, conversations with artists, school programs, and all this. And we have a relatively small staff here that focuses on our education and public programs. So we were looking for a way to consolidate all of that in an interesting way that we wouldn't have to do 5 programs. We could do one more impactful program that actually previewed the work that our audiences would see on stage in kind of a fun, interactive setting. And what you see here in this next slide is the second Thursdays for the Urban Bush Women engagement. And what you're looking at is the entrance to the CAC. Right below this picture is the steps that lead you into the main atrium of the Contemporary Art Center. And in that atrium, we have a woman seated who is having her hair done. Again, bringing back the themes, the ideas of this particular work around hair and Black women's hair in particular. And it became the entrance to an evening of activities that included a variety of different approaches to, or access points, if you will, to this particular work and how women and their hair is a source of many different kinds of conversations that women and people of color have in terms of their both similarities to a dominant culture, but also the real differences in experience that we have. This is just more on how hairstyles and some of the work we talked about in some of these conversations, visible markers of popular culture, they frequently are used, such as, braids or afro to make political or fashion statements. And that definitely applied to the production that we were about to put on stage in a few days, right? You want to talk about this slide, Steph? This is an example of a hairstyle, right?
Sure, yeah. Well, one of the things that we asked ourselves as an organization is what are the many ways, like we will be going into a space and looking at sort of stories put on stage around women and their hair, the social, the political aspects of that. We wondered what were the ways that we can provide an opportunity for women to share their stories in advance of. What is the call and response? There is so much of call and response happening on the inside of the performance that we wanted to continue that, and we were asking ourselves, how do we give as many elements of the performance? How can we make and animate spaces, even social media spaces? How can we animate that and create a call and response? So what you see right here is one of the many stories that were shared via social media. And that got a lot of hits. A lot of women were able to come back, some more than others, but were able to come back, and there was a lot of chatter. It created a lot of conversation between women and connection between the stories that people so boldly shared about themselves and their hair and their stories. People were able to connect to that, and I think that really drove more people. It amplified their interest in attending the performance.
I think what's important about all these activities is how they tie back to the actual performance that folks are going to see. And these aspects are just ways or access points for our audiences just to become more comfortable with some of the themes and ideas that they would be experiencing as part of the piece. So there was a social media campaign that really we did in conjunction with Junebug. You want to talk about that a little bit more? Or do you want me to talk about that, Steph?
I'm sure. One of the ways which I think it's really become, I really use it as an example of when things really go right, is being able to work with another organization and to collaborate on the aspects of the marketing. Both organizations see marketing as also engagement. It's an extension of engagement. And as such, this social media campaign allowed us, as I mentioned before, women to share their stories. And so what you see is just a really very simple template that was laid out, that we asked people to both send in their stories, the photo credit, and to answer 3 simple questions around what their hair story is. And women did that, and we were able to share and create this social media campaign that both Junebug and the Contemporary Arts Center utilized as we were ramping up for the performance to happen itself. Again, I think this is an example of how to prepare an audience for the world that is going to be created for performance.
Exactly. And this is a dance piece for sure. There's a lot of movement and work, that's time-based work that's done in this piece, but it also has a real, as you can hear, probably theater component and topical component. And so in thinking about the engagement activities and what we might do on social media, really kind of got into what the piece was trying to communicate and the ways in which we might connect that story to the stories of our audience. And this is a great example. They're telling a story about hair. What's your story? And how can you share that with us? And it just became a really, really spectacular social media campaign for us. These are some of the stories and pictures that we got. We turned into various kinds of ads on social media that said, "My hair story is," and these are actual individual audience members, right? Let's see what else we have for you. There's some more examples. Right. So from this, there's a lot of things that we really discovered, not just about ourselves, but the audience that we were trying to attract. First, both organizations had to consider this collaboration and the work that we were presenting together a must-do, something that offered higher order benefits to this particular demographic that we were targeting as part of Wallace. We tried to align stakeholders, not just ourselves, but the audiences. That alignment is essential for the success, not only of the initiative that we're doing with Wallace, but it starts with communication to stakeholders. So why is this piece important to them? And what might it bring both to the CAC and to contemporary art and their understanding of contemporary art overall? So there's some overarching ideas that we were trying to weave into these activities that I think we found were effective using some of the things we talked about. Steph, do you want me to continue to do the audience insights, or do you want to take that? Sorry, we're tag teaming, folks.
Yeah, I think we found so many interesting things out as we kind of went forward. One thing was really examining the patterns of attendance. New Orleans is a town where I think someone actually went and did counted out the number of festivals and things that we do. It's a tourism-driven town. So at any moment, you can have the perfect storm of events to be happening in New Orleans that will affect your audience and your audience attendance. But one of the things that we were able to dismiss is the idea that there were that there are certain things that African Americans don't buy tickets in advance. It's not African Americans don't buy tickets in advance. People's purchasing in advance is very different, period. That's across the board. That's not specific to New Orleans. This is something that just is. So we started looking at patterns of attendance in New Orleans and looking at what are the ways that we can allow ourselves some flexibility while still being able to meet the bottom line. Some places of flexibility where we had the ability, when we saw something maybe not happening, we had the ability to manipulate things and offer things that created a buying, a charge and a spark in the buying pattern. So one example of that would be flash sales. Being able to do flash sales with a certain population was really helpful. But I think
Can you describe what that is, Steph? What a
sure.
flash sale? In case people don't understand what we're saying.
We periodically went through, we crunched the numbers, we looked at what our goal was in terms of getting people into the performances. And we were pretty aggressive, I think, with I think it was 5 performances, Neil. Is that right?
It was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was 5 performances, which in New Orleans market is a little aggressive, but we found that pushed us to get even more creative on the things that we were offering. So one was a flash sale, and a flash sale was where we had deeply discounted tickets, but only a certain amount. I think we offered up 100 deeply discounted tickets, and we said, this is it. We only have 100 of these tickets, first come, first serve, and we did it in tiers. And and certain tier levels of pricing. We sent that out to people that were in our networks, and it was a private email. It was not on social media. It was something that felt like it was a special thing that was being offered to the audience. And once we turned around and we saw that they were selling, I then sent another email and said, we are almost sold out, and it's only been 24 hours, and we only have 10 tickets left, which created more of a buying frenzy. And we saw that spark in our tickets that were being purchased, almost in a way that almost frightened us a little bit. We thought something was wrong.
And the tactic here was to get those deeply discounted tickets to some of the most likely people that would want to attend and who would also influence other people to attend. And so as we looked at our list and the frequency of some of the people engaging with our various organizations, those are some of the people that we targeted, because once those people got tickets and we put out the announcement that the tickets were, really going fast, the people who had tickets also amplified that message within the marketplace. And just a couple of things that people maybe don't understand about New Orleans. New Orleans, only about 360-something thousand people that live in New Orleans. And I know it has an outsized, reputation. But at any given time, the majority of people actually living in New Orleans can be from somewhere else. We do the Essence Festival of the summer. It draws 500,000 people, about 150,000 more people that actually live in the marketplace, right? So when we're talking about targeting this audience, we do have a way to target specific people that we see and that we know are influencers within the community that lives and works here, and that's an important part of the tactics that we use for this project. One thing I always talk about a lot is this notion that African Americans are not monolithic. So often when we talk about African American audiences, we talk about these audiences in terms of the relationship to traditional African cultures, whether it be African dance or music or even to a certain extent jazz as being the only thing that will really draw African Americans to, and in our case, contemporary work. And what we now know from this project and from others is that there are some shared values that exist, but there are a number of subgroups within even a community as targeted as African American millennial professionals. We want to describe them. There's differences in lifestyle, attitudes, interests, and media habits, especially in New Orleans. The notion of people who are natives here and people who are post-Katrina transplants. Two totally different kinds of audiences exist now for us. And that all our audiences want to experience the connection of some sort with the art they consume. But for African Americans in particular, seeing their experience on stage, because it can be rare in some of our organizations, equates to acknowledgement that they exist and that they're an important part of what the organization is trying to do aesthetically, culturally, and with the mission of what their work is. So this is often a prerequisite, that acknowledgement. You must be met before the audience can feel comfortable to even explore not only the presentations from the cultures that they represent, but other cultures and other disciplines. Steph?
Yeah. So
you have the next slide.
Blacks don't only want to see Black art and artists, but a bridge is often necessary for us, for inexperienced art audiences. So we need a familiar hook. Then we can turn around and we can branch out. But also the aspect of socializing, of a community experience, these are all priorities. And so those types of events and exhibits in which the Black audiences can interact with family, with friends, with community, will always trump the solo experience. Entering a venue and seeing nobody that they know or anyone who is Black is also, it's a very uncomfortable, isolating feeling. And it's void of any sense of community. And so this is something that we do have some control over, and we like creating these art experiences that people are able to socialize, and we learn information from that. The ability for us to even socialize with people during these experiences are a deep priority, and there's lots of information that comes from being able to do that.
Okay. Invited. I often talk about how people wonder why they don't have a more diverse audience, and my immediate response is, have you really invited them consistently to your institution, formally and informally? Our audience expect the same welcoming visitor experience as anybody that comes through the door, or they simply won't attend, or if they do attend, will not come back. The recent appointment of a Black female employee at our front desk was seen as a huge step towards improving just the perceptions. An audience member talked about how they need to feel special at these because they've been so not special and so dismissed and so completely excluded entirely from consideration of who our programming was meant to attract for so long. They want to make every person feel welcome who walks through that door, and make them feel especially welcome is important in this work. What does that look like, Steph?
So that means you're invited. And being invited. It includes things like Black staff, the ushers, cultural hosts that make space for them to feel welcome, greetings, tours, introductions to the art and the artist that, white constituencies receive by default. That might be signage, posters, brochures, and other marketing materials that feature African Americans in the mix. It's an informal vouching or stamp of approval through word of mouth from personal networks. Or a collaborative partner. This is how Junebug is. This is the space that we feel that we bring the most value is in that, in our networks, and in the people who feel familiar with us. I would also say it might be a drum line, something that is familiar and very culturally specific in New Orleans. It's the kind of thing that makes everybody kind of perk up and, wow, we never expected to see anything like this. But ultimately, all of it means feeling safe. Most stakeholders understood this as sort of a fundamental need, that attendance without feeling judged or ostracized, isolated, or insulted is of the utmost importance.
And they want, particularly younger demographics in general, but certainly the African American audience, they want to participate. They don't want to sit in an audience and not be able to say anything or comment on it. This notion of wraparound programming is really important to them. And in fact, throughout the Wallace Initiative, we've found with our other cohort partners that regardless of the target, that this notion of having some way for the audiences, particularly younger audiences, to socialize pre- and post-show. We have receptions. We have food trucks that we invite to park out front we have music in the atrium of our theater for these presentations. It helps to address this need of really wanting to feel that they're coming into not just an art presentation, but an entire experience. And we want you to stay and celebrate was the term that we use for that. And also, because our work is contemporary, it's a lot of it's very innovative in terms of its form and aesthetic. We wanted to make sure there was a forum for processing and discussing the art itself, the work itself, and not just in a talk-back situation, but for a lot of the audience opportunities to talk with each other. The Black community in New Orleans is in transition. There's a real struggle going on with the gentrification of historically Black neighborhoods in New Orleans. So in addition to that community fragmentation and our real focus on social justice, it continues to deteriorate the sort of life experience of Blacks in our market and are at the same time, while some are entering unprecedented positions of power and wealth. So it's an interesting dynamic that we're walking into, all that to say. And these are all ideas that swirl around everything that we do, and I think we ignore them at our parallels. So even when a show doesn't point to those issues and topics, we have to be cognizant of what the community that we are attempting to attract, the kind of issues that they're dealing with, and what opportunities do they have to talk and discuss and, really deal with any of those issues. Steph?
Exclusive and or rare events and content, sort of ongoing programs, these kind of things don't appeal to this audience nearly as much as special events. The sense of excitement that can be created, and the motivation to not get left out of something. This is, really one of the main points of doing that flash sale. You don't want to get left out of something that you see there's a sense of excitement drawn around. This is really strong. Being able to have the bragging rights to say that, I've attended this event. People want to have that. Also, there's an abundance of cultural and artistic alternatives for Black audiences to consume in New Orleans, where they feel welcome, safe, where they can socialize with people that they know. This really ups the ante for any of the curatorial choices to be really very unique and exciting and energized.
But I think one of the additional things that we learned through this experience is that even non-Black audiences are really glad to see places where different kinds of audiences, young, old, Black and white, are congregating around a singular artistic experience. One of the beauties of, I think, the work, this particular work and the initiative we're doing around it, it requires us to target a population while maintaining our existing population. So we would not be deemed successful if we just all of a sudden had Black audiences instead of white audiences, right? We would want to have audiences that were composed of both and both of whom felt comfortable in the space. And that is what we're achieving through the sort of contextual tactics of events, social activities, et cetera. So it's not only just important to the Black audiences, ironically, it's important to people who feel like they live in a town that is really diverse, but they don't see that diversity everywhere, and particularly not always in the art cultural sector, frankly. So here's just some ideas. We'll go through really quickly because we want to make sure that we get some of your questions. So the commitment to engaging African American patrons is because we believe they have a real contribution to make to the work that we're doing. It has to be intentional, conscious, unapologetic, or it will ring false and ultimately fail. Like any new habit, attention to this initiative has to permeate everything we do now. We can't just do this as a one-off, or it starts to feel like that to the audience, and the audience eventually disengages with the work, great and small, until it's really ingrained. I mean, we have to do this in great and small ways until it's ingrained in our own DNA. And we have to have a gut-level agreement with a movement towards audience and patron diversity that's woven throughout the organization, not just attached to the director or individual department heads, but is, again, somehow woven and built into our DNA. Any last comments, Stephanie, before we take some questions?
No last comments.
Questions from anyone? Yeah.
Thank you. This is Johanna. Thank you, everybody. I want to read out one question that came in through the Q&A that you might not be able to see. The question is, how do you create a space for discussion about the art outside of a talk-back session? Do you provide audience members with discussion questions to take home with them?
Hey, do you mind if I answer, Neil?
Please do.
I think that part of that is not just after the performance. I think that what we're trying to set up is that conversation happens throughout and leading up to the performance itself. We did have a little bit of a Q&A afterwards, but we don't find that that's the most impactful. We felt like the deeper conversations happened in these engagement events, and that's why there was so much time, energy, and focus put on creating the spaces where people could have deeper conversations prior to the performance itself.
And I would say that in terms of questions, one of the things that's really important in developing a new audience is not to anticipate and to suggest what kinds of questions they may want to ask. Because one of the, I think, barriers to people participating more fully, particularly when they're just getting involved with art and cultural activities, is this feeling of, I don't know enough, I'm not going to ask a question, I don't want to appear stupid, right? And so one of the things that the social context that we've created does is it allows them to ask questions, not just of us, but other people that are in the audience that they may know that they feel more comfortable with. So did you get that part where blah, blah, blah? And, they don't have to ask, people who obviously know a lot about it, that as, the person who might be facilitating a talkback, for example, or even myself, who might make some kind of introduction and comment. Everybody's not comfortable with, asking those questions in that context, and they keep them to themselves. But creating an environment where the artists come out afterwards, where there's a kind of, social atmosphere that's created allows those questions to surface. And as Stephanie's saying, it happens throughout the whole process of, the activities that we talked about.
Okay, this is Johan again. This is another question that you can see in the public chat, Stephanie and Neil. The question from Jennifer is, can you please chat about your marketing plan other than the social media? How did you reach out to communities?
Well, I could talk about the CAC. We have a pretty robust and active campaign that is the usual ads, radio interviews, and also spots on radio, et cetera. But we really do concentrate increasingly, particularly for this demographic, more on social media and the social media interactions and these wraparound events. Now, I should say that our house is not huge, and some of you may have gathered that from the numbers we're talking about. We're talking about audiences of 300 to 400 a night, max, right? So we're not trying to create a campaign that's moving 1,200 seats, for example, right? Although what we found is that with the general marketing campaign, which can often do that, meaning sell that many seats, what you don't have is a deepening of the experience that this particular kind of work gives to the audience. And even if it's a fraction of the audience that participates in it, what you find is you, over time, get a more educated, a more engaged audience from these kinds of activities.
I would also say that we think of everything as engagement. If you turn around and look at the communities, how do we reach out to communities? We spend a lot of time being a part of the community and not separate from. And so then it doesn't seem as much of an uphill battle for that. So we are consistently doing things throughout the year to be embedded in community, in the very community that we're talking about. So it doesn't come off as, here's now an ask for you. It's more of, we are now inviting you to another thing that we're doing together, and we will also be there for the things that you're doing inside community, so on and so forth. So we look at those building blocks of what it means to build community and be a part of that, as opposed to just now we're reaching out today. It's an ongoing process throughout the year that makes it easy. People want to be there. They want to be a part of it because you've included them in on everything, and they have also seen you at other events.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another question that came in through the Q&A. The question is, have you developed any diversity initiatives around abstract versus thematic works that people will have a connection to already? You
mean like a piece that's known by an audience, or I'm I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think you're right. I think that it is a thematic work that people already are connected to or familiar with.
Well, I think that the key in all of this work is trying to figure out where the access points to people are. What is that story or what is that theme or what does that subject matter have to do with them, right? And so in order to draw in diverse audiences, you have to really figure out what is it about the Nutcracker that would be of interest to African Americans, for example. And again, you don't have to think about it monolithically, but you do have to think about what is that access point? What a part of that story really might have resonance, right? And for example, in that story, there are a couple of different versions of that, right? The Harlem Nutcracker, which introduces jazz and jazz music to it. There are several different takes on that particular body of music that have been done in the jazz idiom, have been done in big band, etc. There might be ways to just think about that story, the music of that story, the characters in different ways. So it seems to me that is part of it. I noticed there's a question too about getting more Black dancers into the company and into the work, and I think that's a harder lift, frankly, being very familiar with the world of ballet. But what you see happening is that more and more young women and men are actually training as ballet dancers and are seeing that as a viable career. The reason that that's such a heavy lift now in the present day is that has never been really seen as something that could be done, right? But with some of the rising Black stars in ballet, more and more people are starting to say, oh, wow, I could actually do that. Never occurred to them before. Again, this question of invitation, this question of access and question of where would I even train to do that? Where do I do that? That's a longer term lift, but I think it all begins, with a single step, right? Other questions?
Yes, I've got another question that just came in. People have an idea about hair. Nutcracker's already a narrative. Oh, that was Deborah. That's the second part of her question. Yeah. So let me see if we have another question. I think it was just a comment. So I have a question for both of you. Given the history between your organizations, could you comment on why the relationship has been so successful and why you continue to work together over a number of years? It's been a long partnership.
Well, I will say it's not always worked together. It's not always worked together. It worked together 25 plus years ago, and it worked together again when Neil came on board at the Contemporary Arts Center. And that's mainly because it's built on mutual respect of the of each other and the organizations. I think we had a clear idea about what it is each organization brings. I think also Junebug has continued the relationship with Urban Bushwomen, and Neil was extremely respectful when he came and said, I had no idea that relationship went back so far. And it would be silly for us to turn around and talk about presenting Urban Bushwomen and not sitting and talking with Junebug Productions. And we began to map out what that might look like. We have partnered before. I think that what has made it successful is looking at what we really bring as organizations, the strength, also the ability to hear when something isn't working. Again, leaving that flexibility when you see that it may have worked that last time, but for some reason it isn't working this time, and leaving a little bit of flexibility that's there to say, okay, we can still get to our bottom line, and we have the flexibility to do this much. Has been really helpful. And I think also just quite frankly, being able to learn has been something I think both organizations have been very excited about. What we are learning in this, the things that we're discovering and uncovering, as, you know, the idea of these new audiences is real. So many, this is a brand new, in lots of ways, a whole nother group of people that are in New Orleans who actually don't know a long history of sometimes Urban Bushwomen CAC or Junebug Productions. So it's exciting. I think we get excited about it. We get excited about the challenge moving forward, and it has been because of Neil's leadership.
Yeah, I would just say that leadership is a really important part of it, both at the director level and also at the staff level. You really do have to show a commitment to the work by the kinds of things that you go to see in a community and where you show up. People really do notice that, particularly if it's an audience that you don't have. It does make a difference when they say, oh my God, there is the director of the CAC is at my show, right? Or I'm at their lecture or activity that they're putting on. That's really important. Somebody's asking about focus groups, and we did do focus groups as part of the Wallace initiative. It was one of the initial things we do. And in fact, in terms of our theory of change, which had to do with targeting this audience to, you know, diversify the audience we have, one of the things we learned in that focus group is that many people within the African American community thought CAC, which is the initials we use for Contemporary Arts Center, actually meant Caucasian Arts Center, right? That was the word on the street as who it was for and what it was about. So that was one of the very first focus groups we had that came up in multiple groups, which was really interesting. The question about grant funding, you know, Wallace has really taken the leadership in this. I know there are other programs around audience development, but in terms of similar small towns, the thing I would say and the thing I'm encouraging Wallace to think about is, you know, a webinar, a seminar, and all the kinds of data that is available to organizations for free. When we wrote our original grant for Wallace, we relied on census data, economic development data, you know, trend data from our Visitors and Tourists Bureau, et cetera. All that is freely available online. So when we were developing our case, we had some real data to build on to say, you know, I think this audience is definitely here. It's not really being served. We don't see where this audience will be going for its cultural entertainment. So that's certainly a place to start. But grant programs, other than the work Wallace is doing, I'm not aware of. Johanna, you may be. I'm just not aware of them.
I'm not, but I mean, I will say that there are a number of other foundations out there, and if we find some other resources, we can add them to any follow-up that we send out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We have so thank you, Rosie. Do you have any other, if you don't have any other final, we don't have any other final questions, I just wondered if Stephanie or Neil, if you had any final thoughts to take us out this afternoon.
Steph? No, I might. You know, I always have a final thought. You know me. No, did you not have one, Steph? I guess yeah, go ahead.
I would say the trust. I mean, we are vastly different organizations. If you were to look at us on paper, and that Junebug is considered a really small organization with much less capacity than the Contemporary Arts Center, but we like to consider ourselves small but mighty organization. And I think there is a certain amount, again, the trust and the respect that's there, and the ability to have conversations, open conversations. So accessibility to Neil was, I think, really key in that. And to me, what I look at is the power of revisiting things and the power of staying connected and of relationships, which is always key to, I think, community building in general, is that we continue to examine, re-examine, try again, see how we can make it better to get to where we'd like to be. And we're never really there, but we're committed as organizations to exploring that work and challenging ourselves.
Yeah, these kind of collaborations, the power dynamic can often seem to be not in balance, right? And I think what the partners have to do fundamentally is find a way that they're both on equal footing and both operating from a space of mutual respect with the other. We are a larger organization. We do have more resources. We have a huge physical plan, et cetera. But when we work with an organization like Junebug, we really come at that as equals. What do we have to offer? What do they have to offer that's of equal value? And that is critical to these kinds of collaborations really working. I think what I have found in the field oftentimes is that the bigger organization basically swallows the other one in these collaborations, and it becomes about the bigger organization and not about the mutual shared goals that might exist between the two. And that's what this collaboration and particularly this show is built on.
Thank you so much, you two. This has been a really, really interesting webinar. I hope everybody listening in and watching and tuning in has enjoyed it. And I wanted to thank you all, especially Neil and Stephanie. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your wisdom and your lessons. And I want to thank everyone. And thank you for tuning in, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.